りおしまい。
Welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. Now, on this episode, we have a couple of things to get through before we get to the actual analysis. As everyone can see, we've updated our little sidebar there. So please like and subscribe if you enjoy the show. Our schedule is going to be slightly changed until after in April, probably around the middle of April. We'll be able to get back on our normal 3 upload schedule. But for now, we're going to try and build up a backlog for what we foresee will be something that interrupts the show. And we can use the backlog to mitigate that as we're not able to make episodes. So it'll be a stream of continual things for you instead of having a hiatus. Anything to say on that, Brock?
No, I think that this is just going to make it easier for us to also step into our side projects, right? So hopefully we're going to have our new myth and movies ready to go because we're going to be able to shift a bit of our attention by doing this.
Right. And so we're just kind of expanding. And if you saw the trailer that played before this episode, that's the kind of stuff we're trying to work on going forward, even making a channel trailer and things like that. But we'll let you guys see that when it comes out. Anything else?
I don't think that's it.
One last thing. Actually, no, I don't need. There's nothing. I was gonna talk about something, but never mind.
All right.
There we go. Now you've heard it. Now you know. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the episode. This episode is called "Who is Fortune Teller Baba," and it's episode 69. 42069. Whatever. There you go. So, it's a very interesting episode because it implements a lot of introductory things for this kind of mini arc. And we're gonna see some important, very important characters here that need to be explained because I'm not so sure that a grasp has been attained on them.
Definitely for this part. I've been excited to talk about this sequence of what is it, like 8 episodes since we started recording. This was really the point whenever I was watching it the first time that it started to sink in that there was a more mythological substructure to what was going on and that it wasn't just jokes.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was Tao. That Tao
I
part.
was a little slow on it, but oh man.
Yeah.
Like Baba is so foundational to what the whole mythos of the show is about, right? And so I
Mm.
am very excited to talk about
And so let's
why
talk
she's not
about.
just why she's not just a cute, funny side character.
Mhm. So let's get into who is fortune teller Baba.
I think in the original translation of this, right, it says the
The
possibly
possibly
cute
cute
fortune
fortune
teller
teller
Baba,
Baba.
which makes no sense to me. We have the subtitles from what it says is the Dragon Box, which is the sort of authoritative translation, and no one ever says anything about her being possibly cute, even in this episode.
Not in this episode.
But it'll come back.
It will. And so we'll just keep that in the back of your mind. Here it is, right here. The possibly cute fortune teller Baba.
Hmm.
So let's go ahead and get started proper. After defeating the Red Ribbon Army, Goku meets up with his friends again. They're surprised that he did it all by himself, taking out the whole Red Ribbon force. And they all return to Kame House to fix the Dragon Radar. Unfortunately, there's nothing broken, and it seems they have utterly lost the Dragon Ball. Goku despairs for a moment, thinking of how he will revive Bora, but Roshi tells the group that Baba can find the Dragon Ball for them. They all question who Baba is, but after a little bit of explanation, Yamcha, Krillin, Puar, and Goku set off for Baba's palace. So this here is the, and I think it's part of it is Goku's interaction with the Red Ribbon Army that makes him lose the ability to see where the next Dragon Ball is. One, two. Now that his aim is elevated, there are certain things that have to happen for him to be able to achieve that goal. And one of them is what is going to happen here in this like mini eight episodes. Go ahead.
It just occurred to me as you were saying that too. His inability to see this now that he has confronted the Red Ribbon Army the way he has, it makes me think of the idiom "an eye for an eye makes the world blind," right? And that's sort of the blindness that you take on, and why we see some of these villains, let's say, with an eye patch on and stuff like that, because they are losing that sight.
And so let's get specifically to what Goku did wrong in his confrontation with the Red Ribbon Army. His sin is thinking that it's morally justified to use malice against malice.
Right. It's
Or even that
lowering
it's
your
it's an
yeah.
elevated spirit to do that is Goku's frame, which is incorrect.
Right. It's actually to lower yourself to somebody else's level when you do that, and he should know that, right? Especially following climbing Corn Tower.
Right. And so that's his, and he's able to map spirits. But his the malice he got from Tao and he's understood from Tao is it's a very tempting, powerful thing, malice and right? Resentfulness. And so that's his major sin. And so now he is blind to what can redeem him.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so he has to go find it. And we'll talk about where exactly he goes as we get further on.
I do like that it it comes to a point where Bulma says there's one reason why you might not be able to find it. And that's if an animal swallowed it, because the dragon radar can't see through like tissue, I think is how she describes it. And then Yamcha says, well, maybe we'll find it whenever the animal takes a dump. And so I just want to throw that in there right now because I feel like that's sort of foreshadowing what we're going to be getting into as we move forward, where the idea that something has swallowed it and Yamcha's reaction that says that you could find it when the animal takes a dump specifically. I think it's funny that they
Hmm.
say that.
Okay. Interesting. I think I know where you're getting at, but I'm not. You have a really like
Y-
a really big grin on your face.
Well, I don't
Like,
want to get ahead,
okay, don't get ahead.
but I don't think that that's just a throwaway joke that they had. And I don't know
Okay.
if it even is in the English. They change a lot in this arc from the original translation to the English, which
Hmm.
I haven't liked any of the changes so far because we've watched I think 3 of these back now in this arc, and all of them I completely favor the original way of writing it. And there are things in the anime where we're like, "Oh,
But
this
not
definitely
this
gets the spirit
time.
better," but definitely not
No,
in
because they
English.
got the spirit wrong of Baba's palace. To be honest,
I think so.
so uh, a lot of the things that are in the dub are not necessarily for the good.
Right.
But right, and it is to say, Goku's despair too that immediately turns him to the Dragon Balls, right back towards his goal. and he's unable to fulfill his goal presently. And who comes to his aid again but the spiritual father, who can then point them in the direction of another archetype that we haven't yet seen in Dragon Ball. And that's why Bob is very important.
Extremely important.
And so he points them in that direction, and as we know that, and we see on a map, it's in the middle of the desert, and on in a lake, right, that is divided in half with a
Hmm.
bridge between the two.
Hmm.
So we'll get into that once we see it, but that's what it looks like on the map. And
Right.
Goku even mentions, he says, seeing it on the paper, I still don't know where it is.
There's a lot of Goku's blindness to see
It's
things
hilarious
jokes in this
because he
part.
can map people, but he cannot map a map.
Right. The physical map is not what Goku's map is, right?
Definitely not. And so, yeah, I think that's, and so they set off, and Krillin and Yamcha decide to set off with Goku
Right.
as a way to fortify their spirits, which we kind of addressed last time. Poir obviously goes along with them too. Um, but Oolong, no. Bulma, no. And they don't want to come along because Bulma says that she's tired of hanging around Goku and almost dying. And Oolong is just a coward.
Oolong's just full on coward.
Hmm. And it's interesting that Bulma says what she says, because we'll see how her
Right.
story transpires in this arc later
Because we'll definitely return to the fact that Bulma doesn't depart on this journey whenever we get to explaining what this journey is.
on. And it's probably somewhere. It's actually funny that she literally says, "I'm tired of almost dying being
Yeah,
around Goku." So it's
exactly.
ironic, but we'll get to it because we still have a whole episode to go. So while the group travels, they have to stop in town for gas. While there, they all see that Goku's clothes are in tatters. Yamcha decides to get Goku some new clothes, and while the tailor is working, Goku heads off to fetch Appa from the land of Korin. In Korin, Goku reunites with Appa, and they head back to town. After Goku gets his new clothes, Krillin thinks that Appa is a girl, and the crew set off again. So here, right, Goku's clothes being in tatters and his turtle insignia missing, right? These are all things that Tao prioritized first before the elevation of an aim, right? Goku doesn't really care about the clothes. He says they're already comfortable, but it is something that he does enjoy, because later on he does say make sure the turtle symbol is on the front. Like, there are things that he does want to express with his clothing.
Right. It's going to show that sort of Goku returning to civilization in the way that he is almost like a nakedness. Like he's so uh integrated in himself.
Well, for the time being, he has kind of done a return, right?
Yeah.
His return, and master of both worlds moment really happened when he talked to them about defeating the Red Room Army and all that. But him redeeming hasn't happened yet, because we know what he has to do, right?
Right.
But yeah, he's returned somewhat to civilization. Now he needs to again show that reverence for the ancestral spirit that is Roshi, and wear the turtle insignia again, right?
Exactly.
Also, he goes to get Upa, who at first Upa is kind of hesitant to come out. He comes out, they embrace, and Goku tells him, like, I'm only one Dragon Ball away from reviving your father. And Upa still can't believe it, because, I mean, people don't just come back to life.
You just keep saying, "Do you promise? Are you really going to be able to do it?" He's very doubtful of the that potential, let's say.
Well, and he doesn't, I mean, he knows Goku is someone worthy of putting your faith in, but even that is the defeat of death is such a monstrous feat. I don't want to say monstrous, such a marvelous feat,
A gargantuan
that it's
task.
an unfathomable to most, and
Right.
that's why he repeats over and over. Are you serious? And so they ride back together, and as they get back, Krillin thinks that Upa's a girl. Now, what I'm curious what you have to say about this.
It's really strange. I can't quite place it. Like I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue being able to explain what it is about Upa's spirit that Krillin would interpret to be as the feminine or cute, right? Because Upa is pure, right? He's totally pure. Um, and he's never been into civilization, right? So he has it's almost like he doesn't have any sin attached to him because not to say that children have sin attached to them, but there's a difference between like growing up in the natural state and then coming into society and growing up in the society because there's you had mentioned before the pull towards the negative and as people accumulate that pull it seems like it has a presence, right? And that people in society that grow up in a constructed hierarchy that's not say a natural hierarchy are more tempted, let's say, towards sin. And
Hmm.
so the purity I think has something to do with it. But
Okay, interesting. Because I was thinking here that because immediately when Upa arrives, right, Goku introduces him and stuff, and I think it's Krillin mistaking almost the timidity and the I want to say almost submissiveness from Upa that Krillin mistakes for feminine qualities. Maybe not submissiveness isn't what I want to say. Um Politeness, because he's kind of polite when he introduces himself to them, right?
mhm,
And so he may be mistaking those things for feminine qualities because they are somewhat um somewhat civilized, and politis, for example, is probably a feminine quality, I would say.
sure, yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what involves it, as well as the exotic nature of him being from the West, right? That kind of combines with the unknown.
Right. Well, this is an unknown to Krillin because Krillin hasn't stepped into chaos at all until this very moment, right? So that we had talked a little bit about that archetype of the stranger and how there is a redemptive quality to the archetype of the stranger and how it's sort of an other half that you have to always be encountering, right? And so Krillin being this purely, he's kind of like an egghead, right? I've referred to him as egoistic before, but he's very persona based, you could say. And so there's as he comes into contact with the other, the unknown, it's almost like he recognizes it
As inherently
as
feminine.
inherently the other half of experience, right?
Right, and I think that that's exactly it. He doesn't understand Bulma, he doesn't understand Launch, he doesn't understand Upa.
Hmm.
So it's like, if this is unknown, then this must also be a woman. No, not right.
That's a good way of putting it.
So, yeah, and so they take off and set off again for Baba's palace. That's all that really happens in the western town.
Yeah, there's a moment where Goku just stands around naked and Yamcha has to
Oh
yell
yeah.
at him that he can't be
All of
naked,
them
right?
yell. Even
Yeah,
Upa yells at him.
right. And I think that's funny because Goku has sort of we've said this about Goku before, right? Where he doesn't mind just like pulling his pants down and peeing in front of people. Like he doesn't have shame, right? And this is a continuation of that where what Goku has done, especially with losing his symbolic outer representation in his confrontation with Tao, it has laid him naked, right? Like the Goku that you see in the world is what you get. Like that's why I kind of mentioned that he's just so integrated, right? He has literally zero shame and just stands there naked in the middle of the town.
And it's interesting too. I wanted to mention this. Whenever they leave on the Nimbus, Upa says, this is the first time he's left Korin and that he's scared. And Goku says, "It's okay. I was like you once."
Yeah,
And
I love that.
oh, it was so good. It was so good. And so we really see that parallel, and we really see that what Goku's doing here is not just resurrecting Bora, which is why it's the one of the moments that really makes the series. And we'll get
Yeah.
there with the Eternal Dragon Rise and all that. But that's in a couple of episodes. So let's move on.
Yes.
As they near the palace, the Goku encounter a dark storm. Luckily, Yamcha is able to navigate their way out of the storm, and in the clear sky, they can see the palace below. As they land, the whole group is surprised to see some tough guys in line. However, they also see some rich people leaving the palace pleased. As the men are escorted into the palace, the Go crew hear the sounds of fighting and injury. Eventually, the men return in bandages and run away from the palace. So, a couple things also about the palace design. We see it here. It is an interstice, right? It's four of them, right, like this on the water
Right.
in a cross, and it is the separation of water and sky that's a line between them. It's a path, and I would say too, specifically, if I'm gonna compare this to something, I would say probably Dante's Inferno. The storm being the dark forest, and this is the gates of hell that says, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." A-
Essentially,
And
yes.
that's what happens to these five guys, basically. And they leave and they abandon all hope of actually doing what they were trying to do to begin with. Finding their way, right? Which is something Dante is trying to do in that whole story at the beginning, is find his way out of the forest. Interesting to note. But
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? Because that might be the thing that you need to learn from the forest, right? Is that this way of going about it, you're not ready and you have other paths that you have to take to be able to say that you're willing to contend with the nature of being itself.
not only, well, I would say nature of being is a good way to put it because it is encapsulated in what really we're going to see here. So
Right.
we can see that this is a mystical place. And
Definitely.
I reference the gates of hell because it's kind of that.
It kind of is. But I like how in this mythology there is a separation of the underworld and hell though, because they're not the same thing, and there's a space for both of those in the mythology of Dragon Ball, right? Which we'll see much later on.
Yeah, and I would say too,
Um,
like, we could even compare
it's
this
more like
this
Hades than
this
hell, right?
watery area right here, right, is Styx like in its barrier between the worlds, right? Because the
Yes,
river Styx is what goes the underworld to, and all the good underworld, the bad underworld, all of that, right?
all of the underworld,
All
right?
of the underworld, yeah.
Which is to say, I
And it
mean,
may be
maybe
a
people haven't encountered this as much in the fiction that they've seen, but there's a difference between the idea of the underworld and the more Western idea of hell, right?
mm,
They're not the same thing
as a
because,
torturous place, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
just as a space of like the a place that's a punishment, right? There's too much connotation, I think, in the way that we learn what hell is in the now overly encoded Western Christian tradition, right? It's really
Not to
sullied
say
the
not to
pagan
say it's
ideas in it. Go ahead.
it's really sullied with pagan ideas, is that what you
It
said?
has sullied the pagan ideas
Oh,
in it.
okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
No,
"What?"
it's not sullied by them, that's for
Okay.
sure.
Alright, good, good. And so the other thing I did wanna say about this is, 1, the pink ghost. So we see this attendant, which in the English dub has a woman's voice, but in the and I actually like this better. In the Japanese, it's a male voice, uh, because it's a ghost. First of all, it can be either, right? It doesn't really matter. First, but secondly, the fact that it's employed by Baba, right? We kind of see that there is an element of that masculinity brought forth by Baba as her agent.
Well, let's continue the visual motif, right? We have Blue, who has manifestations of his fear in pink. Then we see Pink adorned on Tao Pai Pai. Then we have this pink ghost here.
Pink backpack.
We also have the Dragon Balls being carried in the pink backpack around, right?
Yeah.
Then the pink ghost comes out and is the attendant to somebody.
The masculine pink ghost.
Yes, who is pink but masculine in its voice in the original, right?
Yeah. But I think that fits better with it.
And it's continuing a motif, right? It's not
Mhm.
just arbitrary.
Yes, definitely. So the pink ghost, and then the last thing I wanted to mention is the tough guys, right?
Right.
It's to say that uh one's spirit, let's say even matured spirit, if not properly indoctrinated, cannot even breach the gates of hell.
This isn't a physical space. This is a mystical space
Mhm.
they're entering. And that's to tell the viewer that it's not going to be physical brawn that's going to be tested whenever they come up against what they're going to come up against later on.
And that's basically what is said. And so they run away. And now we have our final part. And I know this one's kind of short, but it's pretty concise, I'd say. So it's time for Goku and his friends to enter the palace. So they walk down this narrow path, right? Like it's not the yellow brick road because it's going to a more mystical interstitial between the worlds, but it is at that path down into the unknown on the water, separating the unknown and known that allows one to enter this building, which is then uh spiritual. And we'll see too the two skeletons, and we'll see in a couple of episodes the larger building that's at the cross. Is this at the cross? Actually, this is at the cross, isn't it?
I think the cross is where they meet Baba, right?
Yeah.
They go
Okay.
into the center, and then the center island has where they meet, and then it goes out to 3 different other
Mm.
destinations,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I think. Um, but yeah, I really like one thing I want to point out about that, mentioning it as a cross, is that it's continuing that idea. Like, there's a point on the pole, right? That is the center, and it's like we've come to the other end of the
This is the
cross.
anti-center. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
This is the polar south, so to
yeah.
speak.
No,
Whenever you're
yeah, I think
thinking
that's a
about
good
it
way of
on a
saying it.
polar level, right? And so here's the cross at the bottom of the world, right? If you think of the world as sort of like the entire universe as a sphere, right? And that's you can see it in like Norse mythology, right? That the world is actually inside of like an outer sphere,
Well, let's even take Yggdrasil, right?
or specifically
Goku would
Yggdrasil, right?
climb the tower. Let's take Dark Souls. The chosen undead climbs the church,
Right.
rings the bell, and then goes
Descends
down
to the
below.
underworld
Yes.
and rings the bell down. That is guarded by the Chaos Witch.
Yeah, you're right. It goes
Um,
two and then one.
yeah.
We never figure out what's on those two, by the way.
But yeah,
But it does
Chaos
make a
Witch
cross.
does block that bell that is lower, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have that pole at the bottom, that basically the bottom point, and that's what it's. I think you had said too, is that interstice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think that's why it's a cross.
Definitely. And so they are escorted by the pink ghost and they meet Baba for the first time. Now, Baba looks like a witch. She's old with pink hair and she sits on top of a crystal ball. Curious to hear what you had to say about old Baba because I have some things for sure.
So I think I know how I want to go about it. We've had this motif leading up to now that has to do with mapping, right? The ability to map a space. What Bulma did to figure out that Goku was on this path at all was she created her own ability to extend her sight out to map something beyond herself, right? With her drone. And so she could use her technology, right? The technology in the show being her manifestation of her potential, use that to see out into the world beyond herself. And what Baba can do with this crystal ball, and what a crystal ball does is not only does it show the future, right? But what she can use it for that we know in this story is that she can use it to find anything, right? So she has the full map of everything, not just an ability to go see, but she knows where to look to find something. And that's different from being able to just look. She has the map of where to look. It's a higher order map than the sort of map that Bulma can make just by being able to extend her sight out and to look.
Anything else?
As far as her being a witch, I mean, I think that much is mostly obvious in what we've talked about so far, but the witch is the conduit for manifesting potential in the world, right? And symbolically, because she does that, archetypally is not just feminine, but is the feminine. Or as far as her relationship with Roshi goes, this is the closest thing to a spiritual mother that we've seen in the show.
Okay. Spiritual mother is a good place to for me to jump in then.
Yeah.
Um because she's the crone, right? She and I want to bring up George R. R. Martin's series, right? A Song of Ice and Fire, because in the crone, what does the crone do? Tell your fortune, right?
Hmm.
And the crone, the older woman archetype, the motherly spirit, has these mystical powers because she's an instantiation of the wisdom born by the proper mode of being followed by the feminine. Similarly to how Roshi is, right? But in this way, too, she is. I don't want to say it's not omnipotence that she has, but it is the ability to find value or the ability to unveil value, right?
Yes.
And so, as a witch, that also goes in with how Dragon Ball elevates these archetypes, because in that the crone tells your fortune. Let's say in a Song of Ice and Fire, the crone tells your fortune,
Right.
but she's not necessarily a ruler of the underworld, which I wouldn't say that Baba's ruler of the underworld, but she has a command over it, right?
Hmm.
And all these fighters we're gonna see soon are kind of indicative of that as well. She starts off with these two skeletons flanking her. She has the ability, right, to bridge the gap between undeath and the present world. And that ability um, stems from that following of the path of proper ordinance of the feminine spirit, meaning all respects to ancestry and the what do I want to say? The proper attitude towards masculine spirits is encapsulated here with Baba being able to find value. Go ahead
Right.
with what you're going to say.
And I want to tie that in as well, that ability to find value being tied into knowing where to look or where to point yourself. That ties into why you would be a fortune teller, because you're telling someone if you orient yourself in this direction, you will
It's
find the
literally
value.
a fortune,
Yes.
right? And that's why it's the word fortune.
Yes.
What is my fortune, right?
Exactly. Where is the value? Where do I orient myself to find the value? And these are the oracles of Delphi, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And so
But
then
that's what I'm
that's
saying.
what he got. He did not get like literal prophecies, right? And that's what people get so confused about, let's say, the stories of the oracles at Delphi, right? Because the philosopher would come back with the insight as to where to look to find truth and to find wisdom, right?
Yeah, and it comes from the feminine
Real
spirit.
value, not just
And also
treasure.
the feminine spirit too, who has much like Roshi, abandoned the I guess desire in more of a Buddhist way of attachment with the world,
Hmm.
right? Because she doesn't have any um she's not married, she doesn't have any kids, anything like that. Because she's not that she's an instantiated spirit as such, which by definition wouldn't, just like Roshi doesn't.
Right, and this goes down to the Jungian level of psychology as well, where Jung talks about this, how the crone archetype is essentially the wise woman manifesting the animus properly, right? The integrated animus in the wise female.
Which can lead the logos to value. And it's
Exactly.
it's almost a distillation of what we've seen um, with what we were talking about, how Mother Nature tends to support the quest of the hero.
Exactly.
And one last thing, we saw her at the top of Corin Tower as a vision of the future. So
Yes.
anyone, you Toriyama naysayers, this was definitely planned.
This is part of what he went the first thing he saw when he saw looked to see his future was her at the top of this pole that we've been describing, right? So he immediately saw the flip side of what he was experiencing,
Hmm. And what his next trial to go through, which is death, right?
the polar
He
opposite.
yes, the polar opposite of elevating one spirit, right? Which is
Exactly.
dealing with the problem of
Dealing
nature.
with and also dealing with sin, right?
Hmm.
What do you do about the fact that there then is sin even in the self?
Yep. And so we'll get to all those questions very soon, but let me go ahead and finish here. So after they meet Baba, she tells them it'll cost 10 million zenny to reveal where the Dragon Ball is. Uh, she does say, since they don't have that money, that they can fight her 5 fighters instead. And the reward is that she will tell them where the last Dragon Ball is. And so we see here that this doesn't make any sense. Why would Baba care if they could fight through her 5 fighters?
Maybe she just wants the entertainment.
See,
She's goofy like that.
I see. I'm under the impression that it has to be there has to be a way for for the valueless to find the value they seek in this juncture.
Yes.
And it has to be that way because Mother Nature and the way the universe tends to unfold is that those opportunities are there for anyone that will seek them. The, let's say, opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated.
Right. I also like the richos who were able to do this with their money. I
Yes.
think it's an acknowledgement of something that's inherent to the way that nature is. It's part of that Pareto principle, right? Where wealth is distributed
Oh
over
man,
time towards one place, and that wealth can be used to interface with the unknown in such a way that you can find what you're looking for. But if what you're looking for is just something material, then you pay for it with something material, right? And we see that they're looking for
I was
a
gonna
bar of
say
gold and stuff like that, right?
what they're looking for. They don't receive any wisdom from their encounter because what they're looking for, their aim is inherently wrong, right? And so they
And so
gain
them
nothing.
fighting the five fighters, even not the fights themselves, but the concept that they would have a struggle to go through that's tailored to to their own ability, rather than just
And notice
something that's
too,
in
because Baba has other powers. We
right.
know this.
Obviously, yeah,
And so, notice that she doesn't actually advertise those powers. It's not something that someone can just come up and buy.
right.
So,
And this is also saying like I can find what you're looking for. Oh, you're not looking for something like that.
mhm,
Well, then I can help you find a different type of thing.
right. So let's go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah.
This episode was pretty short, but I think it was pretty concise in the way that they just go straight from after defeating the Red Rune army. They try to fix the radar. They travel to see Baba, and we eventually meet her at the very end. So, who is she? She is the crone, the motherly spirit, the ancestral mother
The
who can
ancestral mother,
who
yeah.
can see, who let's say has the vision of, has the gift of sight, and also has since she has one foot in the unknown, has power over death itself.
And has fully, I would say, fully integrated the gaze of the masculine as well, which
Yes.
has given her the ability of knowing where to look to find it as well.
And that's why she appears masculine, and
Yes.
she's not cute. She's
Not
not
cute.
possibly cute. She's just not cute.
She possibly was. We didn't even hear it in this episode. We'll
She
hear about it in
possibly
the next episode, I
was. She
think.
possibly was, but after
Yeah.
she's adopted what her proper spirit,
Yes.
um she's not going to be able to be beautiful like that. It's the same thing like in Pocahontas, Grandmother Willow is, I mean, she's also a tree. So
Well,
let's just end it there. All right. So I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
We hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. We're going to upload starting Mondays and Thursdays on YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays on Rumble. So stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed the show. Have a good night, everyone.
I'll never forget the day he showed up. And so, he told us that he was Goku. So we started calling him Goku Black. He looked down on all of us and said he was going to exterminate the human race. I have not only mastered Goku's powers, I have made them my own. divine.